your race, there will be equal justice under the law. With that, I'd like to introduce Yvette Lewis to say a few words. Yvette?
Good morning, everyone. 2 weeks ago, the NAACP Hillsborough County branch challenged all law enforcement to have a candid conversations regarding African Americans and Latino communities and the lack of trust with law enforcement. I received a call from Sheriff Chad Chronister, and he said, "President Lewis, I'm ready." The next day, I received a call from Chief Brian Dugan, and he said, "President Lewis, I'm ready." We are the Hillsborough County branch, meaning we could not do this without Chief Albino, Chief Duncan from Plant City, and Chief Daniels from USF. I then reached out to Darla Portman and Jimmy Owens, President and Vice President of the Police Union, to invite them to join this conversation. I want to thank everyone here for accepting this challenge. We presented them with a list of policies and procedures that needed immediate change in the African American and Latino communities. After much debate over each one, we came to an agreement on what was best for the communities. Let me be clear. This meeting does not erase mistrust by law enforcement, mistreatment by law enforcement, or wrongdoing by law enforcement. However, this is a small step in the right direction. This is work in progress, and we all agree to continue to have this conversation monthly. To implement change in policies and procedures dealing with law enforcement. I want to thank Jay Diaco from Diaco Law for helping us fight social injustice. This was not easy nor a comfortable conversation to have, but it was much needed and long overdue. I want to thank Richard Gunsmar for hosting such a powerful meeting. Last night, I had the opportunity to attend the Citizen Review Board. I listened to the many complaints and the many comments that the community had. The CRB was placed to ensure confidence in the community, that their voice would be heard. Yet the previous administration set the CRB up to ensure failure. I challenged the city of Tampa to make the necessary changes to better serve this community. We are all work in progress, and change starts with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. And with that, I'd like to have our sheriff have some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Diaco. Thank you, President Lewis. Today's an exciting day, and let me begin by thanking President Lewis for her courage to stand in front of everyone in this community and talk about progress and not looking back at the past, but looking and being that visionary, looking forward on how we move on from here. How do we improve our community? I also want to take a moment and thank every chief of police here who made a commitment to making each individual city within our Tampa community better, stronger, and smarter, and safer for everybody who lives in Hillsborough County. I couldn't be more privileged to be a part of a board moving forward. This board has met twice already. This board will meet once a quarter, but will meet monthly until we get to a point where we feel that quarterly meetings are sufficient enough. And if a topic arises where we need to have a conversation, then we will call an impromptu meeting and meet even more frequently or less frequently than we have to. This board that's been created by President Lewis is about action. It's about accountability. It's about trust through transparency. It's about each and every one of us as law enforcement leaders taking an introspective look into our departments to see where we can improve, how far we've come, but more importantly, how much more work has to be done. And it includes topics that I think are monumental, never been accomplished here in the Tampa Bay area. And I'll touch on just a couple real quick. You guys will all have a copy of this. But when you talk about now any officer or deputy use of deadly force is now investigated by an independent body. That removes even the mere perception that there's any type of impropriety, blue covering blue. That's a big step in building trust through transparency. Body cameras, the Tampa Police Department and the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office have announced that they will be equipping uniform officers and deputies with body cameras. You know, and a very expensive venture, but a very large step and giant leap in moving forward and building that trust through transparency, and along with the commitments from every other chief standing here saying, hey, we'll take a look at that technology. Hey, we'll present that technology to our city managers and mayors to see if that's something that we can accomplish. You have the commitment, but the commitment sometimes is different from the ability. All the way down to taking a look at some things that we sat and discussed about everything that local law enforcement here in Tampa are doing. When you think about banning chokeholds, when you think about being able or having policy to prohibit anybody from shooting at a moving vehicle, a failure to act policy. We have those policies already, and all of us have had those policies for quite some time. So we find great comfort in looking at our departments and seeing how far we've come and how far ahead we are of other agencies throughout the state and throughout the nation. But then you begin to take that difficult look, that introspective look that I mentioned on where we can improve. Some of it has been policy-wise. Some of it is building trust through transparency. Some is taking a look into where we can improve our community outreach, our community relations, be more diverse in our hiring, have a workforce that reflects the community that we serve. And then some of it has been training, going back to training. We know how vital that is. If it's civil unrest training that we haven't had since before the RNC, the Republican National Convention, that's something that we're committed to, and we'll even train together. So when there is a response where, regardless of where it is here in Tampa, it will be a unified response. Looking at implicit bias training, that is important. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement says, hey, agencies throughout the state of Florida, you have to have it every 4 years. We've made a commitment to have it every year. We made a commitment to include the NAACP and ACLU in our training. We made a commitment that every recruit that goes through our law enforcement academies will get it. They'll also get the fair to act policy. A new recruit may not know that they have the obligation to step in and intervene if they see something egregious. They will now have that. So when you look at these 5 policy revisions that we made, the commitments that we made, it's a giant leap forward here in Tampa. But the work doesn't stop there. There's another 5, and then another 5, and we'll continue working on this list until every single individual feels safe living here in Hillsborough County. So again, President Lewis, I couldn't be more grateful to be a part of this board, and I couldn't be more proud to stand with every chief of police here in the Tampa community. I am confident that people around the state and around the country are going to look here in Tampa to see how we're doing it different here, to see how we're doing it better here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Chronister. I just want to reiterate that coming together as a community is something that's unusual right now in our country. And through Yvette's leadership, president of the NAACP, we hear that the Florida NAACP is very proud of her and encouraged by the steps that we're taking. The national NAACP is encouraged because these are groundbreaking and revolutionary ideas to come forward as a community with full transparency, open hearts and open minds, so we can continue to move forward for equal protection under the law, economic justice. This is step 1 of a process that begins. I want to thank everyone for being here today, and we want to also hear from a community leader, Connie Burton, who can explain some of the struggles that the community has been through that gets us here today. Connie?
Thank you. You're welcome. Good morning. I first would like to express appreciation to President Yvette Lewis for being not just a part of this press conference, but feeling very comfortable under her leadership. And let me just say to everyone who might not think that Yvette is a strong leader, don't underestimate her. Don't underestimate the fact that she don't possess a law degree, never had a job downtown in one of those nice ivory towers, but she has been the glue that can make things like this happen. And so being here today and being invited to participate, I represent that gravy that sometimes spill on that white tablecloth. Because I believe in trust and verifying. And although I appreciate this very first step, for me, this is a first step. We have a lot of work yet to be done in this city because it represents America. It represents America. And we have been dealing with some long systematic policies that have worked against our interests. Some that became noted in sensational newspaper headlines, such as biking, walking by while black. But I could tell you a horror of stories where so much of mistrust is very prevalent inside of our community. It's real. And although the NAACP is the oldest, baddest historical organization, we got a new group of people that is emerging. And that group has made it very loud and clear that Black lives matter. We have to respect that generation that don't trust law enforcement. Our job is to bridge the gap. Our job, while we are at the table, is to make sure that we beat down every systematic practice that has worked against us. And so while I'm here and I'm glad to see the bullet points, I always say put your money where your mouth is. All across the country, people are talking about ways in which we should be moving funds. I want to commend Sheriff Chronister for the work that he is taking on at the Hillsborough County Jail in terms of mental health counseling, rehabilitation programs, but that shouldn't be the place where our young people receive this training. We don't want to go to jail. We got serious problems in our community, and I'm hoping that the administration would join with Yvette Lewis, not to continue to give money to the same old group in the community that has not done a good job. They have not done a good job in terms of speaking truth to power. And so we say that if you believe that we have to overturn these practices, I want all of this law enforcement group to look inside of their budgets and see how we can come to the table with resources so we can start transforming this community, thereby being an example to the entire nation. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Connie, for those insightful words. We appreciate your participation here. This couldn't be done without the participation of the community, law enforcement, and again, President Yvette Lewis. I just want to take a moment to also give an opportunity for Julius Adams. He's former law enforcement, an attorney here, and he's here with the ACLU. Julius?
Thank you. Like it was said, this is just the first step, but make no mistake that this is a historic first step. The ACLU and the NAACP and the police coming together to bring the community together is a wonderful thing. And it is just a first step, but you have to acknowledge the problem going forward before you can actually solve the problem. So I'm really happy. The ACLU was very encouraged. And on behalf of the ACLU, we say that we're happy about this combination, this collaboration to go forward to try to mend some of the issues that are dealing with trust in the community. The ACLU and with the NAACP and the police department, we've gotten together and we've spoken about issues with strengthening the Citizens Review Board. We feel at the ACLU that the Citizens Review Board, enhancing those powers that it has, will bring accountability, it'll bring transparency, and it'll incite trust, which is the main thing that we are trying to solve here. Because at this point, even though we're making this historic first step, there's still a lot of work to do. The truth of the matter is that trust is an issue. It's still an issue, and that needs to be dealt with. Speaking as on behalf of the ACLU and having time as a former law enforcement, there was times when if I had an encounter with the police, say I was getting pulled over for a traffic stop or something, and I got pulled over, I always felt that I was generally very comfortable and safe in that encounter. But with the recent events that have happened, I have to be quite honest, I'm not so sure. And so it's because of that we really need to do something. And I'm really happy to see the chiefs here and the sheriff and everybody coming together to really try to solve the problem. I don't believe this is happening anywhere else in the country, and I think this is a great first step. Although it's the first step, it's a great first step in moving forward. On the 18th of this month, there was another incident, unfortunately, with her name Janeshia Wilkerson. She had an incident where she was pulled over, and I believe there was a video out, and a lot of people probably saw it. I saw the video, and I'll just say that I'm really happy that the young lady is not hurt. It's practices like that we really need to try to work through to bring things together. Like I said, this just happened, but I'm still encouraged. The ACLU and the NAACP is still encouraged that together we can get to where we need to go, to have true reform, to have true change, and to come together to bring the community together under the label of trust, because that's what's needed now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Julius and I met for the first time on Thursday. I met a lot of these individuals for the first time on Thursday. Julius and I will be friends for the rest of our lives, making change in this community. I want to just personally thank all of the chiefs, Chief Daniels, Chief Duncan, Chief Dugan, Chief Albano. I want to, Darla, the PBA, for Jimmy, for you being here, Joe, everyone from the community for being here and being our participant in this. It shows a big difference. Gretchen, the president of the ACLU, is here. And this community development, this community progress begins with a council that will be co-chaired by Yvette, the president of the NAACP, as well as Sheriff Chronister. The first meeting will be on the 22nd. We intend to see how we will begin implementing these with all of the appropriate agencies and governing bodies and mayors. Thank you so much for coming here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what this community is trying to do to proactively deal with the racial injustices that we see all around this nation and try to be a beacon of hope for the rest of the communities and the rest of cities to see what can be done with open hearts, open minds, and full transparency. This is what can be done. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Struggle to get everyone on your force on board with these major changes, or do you think that they will adapt to what you're proposing here today?
That's a great question. The question is, do we think we'll have any difficulty implementing these measures and getting the buy-in from our troops? Absolutely not. They live here. Their families are here. They can easily turn on the TV and look across the country and see what happens when law enforcement's not on board. But it starts with building a culture, and the culture has to start at the top. The culture has to start with the diversity and who you hire and how you hire them, how you train them, and who supervises them. So that's what we'll continue to focus on.
Sheriff, have you gone to the FDLE and asked them to investigate officer-involved shootings or fatal shootings like Mayor Castor has announced as well?
We have, the question is, has the Sheriff's Office also met with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement about asking them to investigate and be the independent body in our shootings. We've had several meetings. I hope by the end of this week, first part of next week, that formal agreement will be signed. But if there was a shooting that occurred tonight, God forbid that doesn't happen, they'll be the ones to respond and handle it.
You also agree that they should, maybe the statewide prosecutor should be the prosecutorial arm of that to maintain that distance?
That's a recommendation that this board has discussed. We looked at some different compromises. Yes, the state attorney is an independent body. We threw an option out there about having a member of the ACLU be a part of that investigatory body with the state attorney's office. We also are exploring the options that a statewide prosecutor from the Attorney General's office would be assigned the case. We are actively pursuing that option as well. So we don't have the exact answer to that. Hopefully within the next meeting or two, we'll have that answer, but that is a desire.
How have these new policy proposals been communicated to your deputies and the police officers, and how did you land on these specific?
The question was, how did we land on these 5 being the most important to begin with, and have our officers been notified? We are in the process of notifying our officers. Some take operational changes, standard operating procedure changes, and policy changes. But yes, we've already issued some memos to our troops. We're already working on some training videos to push out to our troops until they get the annual in-service training.
Evening of the 30th and the 31st was kind of a wake-up call to this community as to the level of anger and the level of frustration that was out there. How do you think, had some of this stuff been implemented beforehand, that could have been quelled somewhat?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think that night when the peaceful protesters went home and the violent rioters and looters came out, I think those individuals were taking advantage of a situation. But I certainly am not blind to the fact that there was some frustration in there. I don't know if having these policies implemented then would have changed that. That's a good question. What I can commit to is having these changes implemented moving forward to ensure that no one in this community believes that they have to turn to violence or civil unrest to accomplish anything here in Hillsborough County.
There's been a strong push in the community for a revamped Citizen Review Board in the city of Tampa. There was a large discussion about that last night that I know Chief Dugan attended. Would you consider something like that, a Citizen Review Board, with independent powers for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's not on the table at this point, and I think that's what's going to make this committee. This isn't a figurehead committee. This is a roll your sleeves up and come up with a solutions-based policing on how we can fix things in our community. There's no options off the table. I'm not opposed to anything. Certainly would have to get educated on how it would work. It's a different dynamic that would be presented with the sheriff's office versus the city of Tampa, but 100% there's no option that's off the table moving forward.
Where do you think those other citizen review boards that we've had in the past maybe failed? How will this be different?
I think you would have to ask Chief Dugan. I don't have one of those boards, so at this time I'll turn it up to Chief Dugan if you would like to answer that question.
If you want me to get it.
You want it?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just asking, how would these new efforts be different from efforts we've seen in the past to regain trust with our community? And how would a citizen review board be different? Where have you failed?
Well, I think everybody getting together and sitting down at the table and having those discussions is the major part of it. And then the Citizens Review Board, that's what we need to figure out is how does the community feel about it and what changes do they think need to be made. And I think the problem is law enforcement is driving too many of those conversations, and maybe we need to start listening more so that we can get to where we need to be.
The Citizen Review Board has been an embarrassment to the city of Tampa and the community. It was designed for failure by the past administration. We are here for change. And that's, like I say, we call on the city of Tampa to implement those changes. One of those changes that we're asking for is that the mayor relinquish the Citizen Review Board and put it under the City Council so it can ensure trust back into this community. You have to understand there's a lack of trust. When we all sat down at the table, we didn't have trust in each other. But when we left that table, it felt better. Did it feel good? It felt better. I was able to sleep. We're here to build this relationship and to take it the next step. This city has been suppressed and has gone through systemic racism for the past couple of years, and we have had enough. Right now, we're here for the community. These gentlemen answered the challenge. I put the challenge back out there to the city of Tampa. If you're all about a diverse city, meet us at the table, just like these gentlemen did. That's a very good question, and you ask her that. You ask her that. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your questions and your participation. And we're going to prove to you that we will make change. We're going to be making meetings monthly until these changes are effected uniformly. And we plan to have these changes be a beacon for the whole nation. The NAACP, we plan to help this be raised all across the nation so that communities of color in every city and every county can count on equal justice under the law. Thank you.